Welcome back, and now we continuing our discussion on the global economy with special reference to Pakistan. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me, we have Shoaib Sultan Khan Saab. He's the chairman of the board of directors for the Rural Support Program Network. And along with him, we have Muzaffaruddin Saab. He's the general manager of the Aga Khan Rural Support Program. Thank you very much, sir, for being here.
My pleasure.
Sir, let's start with Pakistan's focus on economic development, especially when we look at it in the perspective of CPEC. We have industrial development as one of our concerns. We have job creation, and we have special economic zones and urban development. How far do you think we've traveled on this road to development, and how much further do you think we still need to go?
Well, let me give you a worm's eye view, not the bird's eye view which you are asking me to give. Because if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which the UN wants every country to implement, the first goal is poverty reduction. Now, how are you going to reduce poverty?
Well, one way is to eliminate all the poor people by killing them off, isn't it?
No, you don't have to.
I'm just being facetious here, sir.
Well, for the last, the 65th year of my working life, 45 years I have worked with the poor in Pakistan and South Asia. And let me tell you that, as Michelangelo used to say, when his David used to be praised, that I have done nothing. David was in the marble. I simply removed the superfluous material. And my experience has been that every person, man or woman, rural, poor, they have tremendous potential to come out of poverty. The basic issue is, how should they be supported? That the obstacles which are keeping them poor, those obstacles are removed.
Well, one case in point is the Sugar Mills Association that's dealing with the poor, and the way you've seen them protesting all over the streets just to have a right support price for their hard work. Let's go on, sir.
No, you see, if you look at Pakistan, there are 18 million rural population households, of which, although there are different figures, but the figures that I see when I go to the areas, like 12 years I worked in Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral, and now I'm working in almost all the provinces, the rural support programs. Almost about 48% need support, and on top of that another 20% are vulnerable. Now the main thing is that unless we reach and we go to the household of each poor, how are you going to improve there? And that is where the main thing is, that if you look at the state, there are two pillars of a state. One is the political pillar. There is the National Assembly, provincial assemblies, district councils, and union councils. People say, well, if there is local government, it will solve this problem. They cannot reach each and every household.
Right.
There is the administrative pillar, the president right down to Patwari.
Right.
Can they reach each and every household? And I learned from someone. There was a visionary whom I met when I was working at that time in the then East Pakistan in 1959, Akhtar Hamid Khan. And he also said, there's nothing original which he was telling me. He also learned it from the experience of the world, that how poverty, many countries were poor, they are not poor today. But he said that they all introduced a third pillar, which he used to call the socio-economic pillar. And the socio-economic pillar is exactly what Lincoln, when you look at his definition of democracy, it is by the people, for the people, of the people. Now, by the people are the elected members. For the people is the administrative pillar. Where is of the people? That is what rural support programs do. For example, in 12 years that I was in Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral, I mobilized 1 million people. Everybody said, well,
Well, if you look at Chitral and you're talking about Gilgit-Baltistan, sir, the Aga Khan has put a lot of effort in uplifting the people there. And if you look at the just the education literacy rate there, it's much higher than other parts of Pakistan. So, of course, a lot of credit goes to the Aga Khan for putting in that effort.
I was also
a part of that.
I was also invited by him to initiate what he called the Aga Khan Rural Support Program, December 19. And my first meeting with His Highness, I said to His Highness, I said, Your Highness, I'm not Ismaili. Why do you want me? He said, look, I've got a lot of programs in the social sector, health, education. But unless and until economically people and everyone, he said, you can't have islands of wealth prospering. In geopolitical sense, he said, it is very sensitive area.
So how do you think, sir, let me bring this question to Muzaffaruddin Saab. How do you think that the formula or the model that the Aga Khan has developed in Gilgit-Baltistan, can it move further on and can it be used in other parts of the country? And if so, then why is that not being done, sir?
I think it's a very important question. Thank you very much. The first thing is Aga Khan Rural Support Program, which Shoaib Sultan Khan was, the pioneer, the founder who started it. This has been already kind of replicated in the rest of Pakistan as a rural support program, like National Rural Support Program, and all the provinces have replicated as Sarhad Rural Support Program or Sindh Rural Support Organization.
But we haven't seen the same results.
Yes. And I'm just coming to that.
Okay, sir.
And the second part is this program it was so successful because, as Shoaib Saab was telling us, it is by the people, has been replicated by the AKDN, Aga Khan Development Network, to 10 more countries in Africa, South Asia, in Central Asia. What has been the critical thing there, which I think is AKRSP has helped people. The most important thing was to create social capital. These people were organized into a community organization they call Women Organization for Women and Village Organization for Male. Now these organizations, almost at one time, almost more than 70% of households in Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral are organized. When this critical mass is organized, then you can see a real development because it manifests into, like, these people can now think they feel more empowered, they feel
a sense of ownership.
Sense of ownership.
That's very important.
And though it took 30 years, now these organizations are more institutionalized. For example, I will give you three of very interesting examples. The first one is these village and women organizations, which are grassroots organizations. They have institutionalized to some important practices like participatory planning. Secondly, they have nowadays a very good transparency. They make decisions, implement projects very transparently. Thirdly, these organizations have now clustered into formal, they call it at Union Council level, local support organization. So these formal organizations are now very closely linked with government, supplementing or getting a government, which Shoaib Saab was referring to, to household level, the government
support
services and supports. The second most important thing, which I think in northern Pakistan, which in AKRSP we are working, is this women organization. When these women were organized, they got a platform where they can think, they can plan, and also they can take some very important initiatives together. So I think the empowerment comes not individually, it is through this collective effort. So I and Shoaib Saab was, I think, few weeks before in Gilgit-Baltistan, and what we have there saw, these people have saved almost more than 2 billion rupees. So when people have capital, that is the fourth important thing. When a woman has or a poor people have access to capital or own capital, because they were doing these, Shoaib Saab introduced this savings, 1 rupees, 2 rupees saving. So people have now saving. Women have money. So what they did very rightly invested in very important areas. For example, one very interesting thing happened, which you referred, is women's education. These women organizations invested their savings into education. So that's why in Gilgit-Baltistan, particularly in Baltistan region, highest level of enrollment. Some area has very high literacy rate, even like Hunza. So these are some of very important things happen. Apart from that, these women also got empowered, so they can take some new initiatives, some, touching the glass ceilings. For instance, Samina Beg, she climbed Mount Everest.
Right.
Because she got these support that she can do it. Or you will be surprised if you come in northern areas, women have formed a construction company.
Fantastic.
100 young women are working together and doing all the value chain. So they are working in non-traditional areas. So this is, I think, a very important lesson which we learn from this.
Well, we need to spread those lessons across the board and across the country, sir. That's the real key.
I'm going to answer that, why it has not happened all over.
Thank you, sir.
Basically, this is a holistic approach. It's like an architect's design. And in the rest of Pakistan, although we got a replication called the Rural Support Program, but basically this is something which cannot be done by an NGO or by sort of government by itself. It needed an organization which has the flexibility of an NGO and resources of government. When it came to the resources of government, they accepted the concept, they did it. But like an architect's plan which I presented them, they said, oh, we like the dome. We'll only build the dome. In AKRSP, it was the entire thing. Cyrus himself used to come and see what it is done and support it. Wherever it has been done, now, for example, you'll be happy to know that since 2009, there are a couple of districts where we got the same resources we got in AKRSP in Sindh. And in those two districts, in 2015, European Union went there, their delegation, and they were so impressed, they said, no, we would like to do it.
So you could actually, you saw that those results were replicated in those two districts that you were talking about.
Now there are 18 districts where, but it is for the next 6 years,
So how can we make sure that the pace of development can be improved, sir? Because if we're talking about in terms of decades and decades.
Give the resources, that's all. Whatever. How did, in India, where you took me in 1994, and that they said, well, with the achievements of AKRSP are so great, why don't you take the lessons to South Asia? And I was very skeptical that how will I sell it to India? And they accepted it, the government. In Andhra Pradesh, within 10 years, 11 million rural women got mobilized. But government then provided all the resources which His Highness has provided me in AKRSP. In fact, they launched now, according to the World Bank, National Rural Livelihoods Mission in India, which is the largest rural development program in the world. And they say that they have learned it from Pakistan rural support programs.
But sir, unfortunately...
So you have to ask the Prime Minister, you have asked the government, don't ask us why it is not
Sir,
happening.
you're the one, you're the expert, sir, so unfortunately
I'm the expert, I'm telling you the
you have to answer these questions, sir. But we've also seen a rather large disconnect between income inequality and governance and corruption. Now, these are also issues that are plaguing our society as a whole. So how do we deal with all these
You see, we have 7
factors?
million rural people organized under RSPs. And we have about, I think, 12,000 professionals who are really working in RSPs. But what Muzaffar referred to, the social capital, to run these 400,000 community organizations, we have 1 million villagers who have been trained, who are the social capital.
So human capital is a very important thing. So investment in human beings is what we are lacking here.
No, human capital is one thing, but social capital is really that one person, one woman, 2 persons in the organization who take the organization forward.
So good leadership, you're saying, is the key over here.
Well, without leadership, it won't.
Absolutely, sir. No,
I mean,
no doubt about that.
Look at Pakistan. If we have a good leader, where would you be?
That's a $1 million question, sir. I'd like to ask one last question from Muzaffaruddin Saab. When we talk about regional economic development, and sir was also mentioning the work that he did in India, which was also very good. Where do we see CPEC? Where do we see ECO? Where do we see SAARC, ASEAN? All these organizations. How integrated are they really towards the upliftment of the entire area? Because what we see more is warmongering and pulling each other down rather than supporting each other to have overall prosperity. Again, income inequality is a huge issue in our present day. It's all over the world, sir. So is there any way or any thought about solving that aspect?
I think because as Shoaib was referring to this warm view, I will, because CPEC, let's take example of CPEC. CPEC is coming, through northern Pakistan or Gilgit-Baltistan.
Absolutely.
And I was just recently in a conference in EC mode where all these countries get together, SAARC countries, mountain countries, and we talked about also CPEC was there. And one of the most important things is, which we learned from AKRSP experience, is this mega investments or mega projects or mega works. For instance, in Gilgit-Baltistan case, when the Karakoram highway was constructed, it was of course a strategic road. But people from Gilgit-Baltistan, those areas where AKRSP organized them, took maximum benefit from Karakoram highway than those areas where they were not organized. So what we think that, this CPAC is coming, and I personally believe it, that people, those who are organized, those who have a plan, and I think this happens with these community organizations because they do a collective thinking, which is $1 million thinking,
right,
because many people get together. So I believe that people will get maximum benefit of these mega projects. Rather, if mega projects goes there, we always tell in northern Pakistan, Gilgit-Baltistan, that we see Indus rise and fall, we can't get benefit of that.
Right.
Similar will happen to the CPAC, if we can see trucks going and coming, but I believe that if people are, they are organized like we have in Gilgit-Baltistan, educated, and one very important area which is part of this RSP movement, we call the human capital, which you referred.
Right.
This investment has been done initially, and now we need to
expand
invest
on
more,
that. Yeah, absolutely.
relevant to these all opportunities. I think we can maximum benefit from these mega investment, and I think these all investments are for people's benefit, but it is how we organize ourselves to get that.
I have one request to make to you.
Please, sir.
You are a very unusual anchor. I'm really impressed by your enthusiasm.
Thank you very much.
Come, get out of this, come to Sindh. I'll arrange for you and see. We have organized almost, nearly we are with the European Union and government of Sindh, because they're the ones who are supporting us. I mean, you will be surprised, the government of Sindh is really in the forefront, and EU, of course, and you'll see what these women are doing.
Well, sir, more power to them. I'm a great supporter.
Well,
and
you should come and
even
see.
Even though people don't think that it's the right thing to say.
Do a program on them.
Absolutely, sir. You know what Hitler said, that if you want a great nation, give me great mothers, will make a great nation. And that is so true, even though it was coming from him. But thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time, because we're completely out of time. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your views with PTV World.
Very, very good.
Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we'd like to say that the only way forward is for each one to play their part in making Pakistan a success, and we should all do that, and I pray and I hope that that happens sooner rather than later. And on that note, it's goodbye.